Meeting the Year 2000 Computer Challenge, Schools, Colleges, and the Millennium Bug. A teleconference produced by the United States Department of Education. Now, live from WETA in Arlington, Virginia, here is your host, United States Secretary of Education, Richard Riley.
Well, good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to welcome all of you to the U.S. Department of Education's National Teleconference on meeting the Year 2000 Computer Challenge. Over the next 2 hours, we hope to offer you an in-depth look at the nature and the scope of the critical task facing America's colleges and schools, as well as strategies for meeting the challenge. This is a vital issue not only for colleges and schools, but really for every facet of American society. And it's my firm belief that the Millennium Bug ranks among the highest priority issues for the management of every institution in this country. The Y2K bug appears to be a technical matter because the remedy does require rewriting the computer code or replacing the computer chips. But oversight of the fix is an enormous management challenge. Imagine compiling an inventory of all the systems that require changes just within the administration building of your college or school district. And now extend that task to every building within the system, and you begin to see how big a task this really is. Mike Smith is the leading person for our efforts within the department, and for months he's met with at least once a week staff members who are charged with ensuring that our systems are Y2K compliant. Our senior executives are on top of this matter, and I'm very confident that all of our systems will be ready for the dawn of the new millennium long before its arrival. Our department has collaborated with education associations here in Washington to devise ways that we can help schools and colleges attack this problem. We've conducted surveys, we've hosted focus groups, and addressed the issue at association conferences. We've learned that some educational institutions have done a great deal of work in this area, while others are struggling to handle a variety of issues. Now, this event is designed to share the information that we have assembled, and I hope the spirit of collaboration takes hold at each of today's conference sites, and that this electronic gathering can inspire some cooperative efforts in your community. The entire education community, including the Education Department's customers and service providers, faces the year 2000 issue. And the education community leadership needs to take action right away to assure that your schools and your colleges are on track. We need to work together to ensure that everything we do, from exchanging data to writing emails, is your effort in this year 2000 compliant. Now, while the problem is an urgent one, with a solid deadline, there is no reason to panic. And I believe if we tackle the challenge with common sense and with due diligence, we will all be ready for the next century. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the man who has what I imagine, I really think it is, the biggest Y2K job on the planet. The chairman of the President's Council on Year 2000 Conversion, John Koskinen. John?
Thanks very much, Secretary Riley. I'm delighted to join you here today, and let me begin by applauding the Department of Education for its work, as you noted, in the past several months, reaching out in a collaborative way with the entire education community in the United States. It's a critical part of the activities of the federal government at large, and we've asked every agency to do what you're doing here, which is to deal with their constituents as best they can to, in a joint effort, deal with what is clearly a global problem. I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate the department, which, according to an Office of Management and Budget report that will be issued today, is no longer on the watch list. It's a testimony to the substantial amount of work that's been done by education employees at all levels to deal with what are some of the most complicated systems in the United States and, in fact, in the world. And in light of the great progress that has been made, that report will note that it looks clear now that the Department of Education will meet the government's goal of being compliant with all of the work done by March 31 of 1999. I thought I might give everyone just a brief overview as to how we're viewing this problem from the standpoint of the government at large. The first tier of the problem are the federal systems that we own and operate and are responsible for. And I think, as noted, the Department of Education has become a leader in its remediation efforts. And across the government, all of the agencies, I think, are making good progress. We have a couple that have major challenges, like the Defense Department. But as a general matter, the risk to the economy and the public from the year 2000 problem are not going to come from the federal systems. We are more concerned about the systems at the second tier with which we interface. We interface with a significant number of state and local systems for programs that are federal programs but are run at the state and local level, whether it's Medicaid or unemployment insurance, food stamps, job training, a wide range of programs depend upon not only federal systems to be compliant, but state and local systems to be compliant, state by state, community by community. And we are reaching out to them again in a joint effort to work together to see that we can make sure that all of these systems run into the year 2000. The third tier of the problem is everybody else in the world that we don't regulate, oversee, or directly necessarily exchange data with, but whose failure would be a problem for the economy or the public. And here, as with this meeting today, but with other agencies across the government, we are reaching out to organizations domestically and internationally to deal with the problem. As a general matter, domestically, we think that the basic infrastructure of this country will hold, that there will not be failures of the power grids, that the national telecommunications system and the banking system will work appropriately. We are much more concerned about those organizations that are not doing anything or not enough at all, and that is some smaller or medium-sized companies, although a lot of them have done very well, some smaller or medium-sized towns, cities, and counties, although again, a large number of them have done very well. And internationally, we're concerned about over half the countries in the world that have done little or nothing on this problem and have led us to work with the United Nations to bring year 2000 coordinators from around the world to the UN to meet with us this Friday to discuss the global challenges of dealing with not only preparing for the year 2000, but managing whatever problems there are afterwards. So we look forward to continuing the dialogue not only with the department, but with all of those of you out in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koskinen and Mr. Secretary. I'm Nancy Mathis, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. We want to welcome the college, university, and school staff assembled at the 1,400 sites around the country that are taking part in today's program. You're a critical part of this discussion, so if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make, please call us at 1-800-939-9382. In advance of today's program, people have also faxed us questions, and we'll be getting to them very shortly. But first, here's a basic question. Mr. Secretary, what do you say to a college or a school district that says, is this really that important? Why should I put this problem ahead of the many others that we have to deal with?
Well, yes, it is that important, and it's right clear why it is. The other operation at a college or a school is really dependent on computer systems so much that other things won't work unless this works, and that's very apparent and obvious. So I think you have to put it ahead of everything else because everything else is dependent on it working. I know the President spoke to us in the Cabinet some months ago, a year or so ago, and said it was the #1 management organizational thing for the federal government and the Vice President, and they urged us then to go out in our departments and make sure we do everything possible. I think everybody else should put it at that kind of category of importance, but not to panic. It can be dealt with, and it is being dealt with by those who are carefully doing it. And so I think we need to raise it to that kind of priority, but do it in a sensible way. And we do have time frames. We know exactly when year 2000 comes in. We know we've got to get this ready way before that. So let's put it as a high priority, but not panic.
John, you touched on this before. How do you think the country is doing?
Well, as I said, I think generally we're in pretty good shape, although there's a lot of work to be done at all levels. And one of the things to remember is that no one's ever dealt with this problem before. And so even when you fix a system, you test it, and you implement it, we're not going to know for sure about all of the systems until we roll into the year 2000. So one of the critical things we're stressing to federal agencies and everyone else in the country is not only should you fix your systems, not only should you test them, but you should have backup and contingency plans available in case something you thought was fixed is not fixed or something you rely on is not fixed. But as I say, generally, I think our problem will come with those organizations that have decided it's not their problem, or they're going to wait until it breaks and then fix it, because I think that's where the risk is. Those who are working on the problem, who, as Secretary Riley said, have made it a senior and a top priority of their organization and understand that it goes to the ability of their organization to function, I think will do all right. It's the ones that, in fact, are watching the rest of us do the work that I think are going to present the risk.
Now, in some school districts and in some towns across the country, schools and community colleges and universities, they're the biggest employers. So a lot of people in those communities are worried, what about my paycheck that's direct deposit? What about my health plan, about my prescriptions?
Well, they're good questions. We think that at this point there's no indication that there will be systemic failures. The banking system is probably in the best shape of all industries in this country, thanks to a lot of hard work jointly by the federal regulators and the banks themselves. So that those tests are going on right now. The banks are testing with each other and with the Federal Reserve, and we think direct deposit systems will work. We think that the banking system will work. And that also one of our working groups is with the pharmaceutical manufacturers, and they are providing us an assessment of the state of progress of the industry, and they think that they will be in good shape. They are only concerned that if people panic and decide to try to buy a lot more than they normally do, the panic itself could be the problem. But I think the underlying systems there will be appropriately fixed.
Good, good. That's good advice. You know, because the year 2000 challenge is somewhat different for colleges and universities than it is for school districts, we're going to talk with some people from each of those communities in turn. We'll look at elementary and secondary schools in just a moment. But first, just what is the Millennium Bug? Well, here's a quick video that helps explain the issue.
Although it may have many names, Y2K, the Millennium Bug, the year 2000 problem, it all means the same thing. The year 2000 problem is caused by a shortcut used in many computers and microchips. Years ago, to conserve memory space, programmers used two numbers to record the year. For example, 72 would mean 1972. Why is this a problem? Unfortunately, computers and microchips that still use two-number years will, on January 1st, 2000, recognize 00 not as 2000, but as 1900. This could cause them to either shut down or generate incorrect data. In our electronic information-dependent society, that could be a big problem. Virtually all computerized systems are vulnerable, from student record-keeping and financial management to telephone and security systems. Year 2000 problems can also affect personal computers, local area networks, telecommunications systems, and systems and equipment that use embedded technology, such as fire alarm systems, heating and cooling systems, elevators, and telephone switching equipment. Because there is no single solution to the Y2K problem, each school district and college or university will have to address the problem locally. Don't delay. Technically, the Millennium Bug is not difficult to remedy, but it is time-consuming. Seek reliable technical and management advice to develop a plan and implement it. The experts agree that we can protect our schools and colleges from the Millennium Bug.
Let's meet our first panel. Daniel Tasato joins us from Miami, Florida, where he is the Associate Superintendent of the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. The Miami-Dade schools have taken an aggressive approach to the Y2K challenge, and Dan is going to share some of his experiences with it. And Bob Hughes has been a member of the Lake Washington School Board in Washington State for the past 20 years. He's been president of the school board for 4 of those years and is a retired executive from the Boeing Company in Seattle. Bob has also been an advisor to his state education agency on technology issues. Welcome to you both. First off, how are your respective states doing with this issue?
You know, it's very much a priority question, and there are people who are just ignoring it and maybe thinking about it, and there's others that have actually assigned people to it. As a school board member, I've found that if the school board asks the question, they legitimize the process, and it kind of turns people on. If the school board does not ask the question, then it can be delayed. It can be just kind of put back a ways. So I was real happy to be able to help ask that question and get people on it, put people to work looking at it.
This has been a fascinating problem for us in Dade County, basically because of our size. With the support of our superintendent and with the support of the board, we feel comfortable that we're making rapid progress on the issue, as comfortable as you can be with a problem that's this variable.
What are the most critical issues when you look at this huge problem? Where do you start?
I think a good place to start in any district is with your disaster recovery plan. That is an indication of systems that you have within the district that will fail in the event of a natural disaster. For us, since we sit in Hurricane Alley, we have a detailed
right.
disaster recovery plan, and systems such as payroll, personnel, budget, and student records crop up in most disaster recovery documents as a good place to begin in considering this issue. Those are mission critical applications. They are areas where if they fail, you cease to function. They therefore are the ones that need to be renovated and tested and certified first.
Yeah, many school districts, though, are quite small. They don't have a disaster plan. I would suggest that the guide that is being developed by the Department of Education has a checklist which is absolutely excellent in order to kind of shake your memory and go through, is this mission critical or isn't it? And there are a lot of things, like your microwave ovens, the VCRs, they're still going to work. I mean, you hit the power button, it'll go on. And it may be just inconvenient, who cares? But there are other things, security systems, engines, and so on, that you do seriously need to look at, and that's what that guide helps you walk through.
Bob, you had an interesting perspective to bring this whole Y2K issue to the school district.
Yeah, I was a programmer in the 50s and 60s. I moved into management. I'm part of the problem. I was one of the guys.
I'm glad you feel free to admit that.
I was one of the guys telling those people to save memory, and use 2-digit codes. I'm joined with company, Alan Greenspan, for instance, was in there with me. And we had absolutely no idea that the programs we were writing at that time would even be in existence today. I mean, it was COBOL code, Fortran. And in many cases, those programs have been thrown away, the original source code, and all there is a binary deck sitting somewhere on a machine. So you've literally got to look at it and talk about rewriting it, because the originator isn't even around anymore. You don't know where they are. If they are, you're lucky. You can also go to websites and start finding out which ones are compliant and aren't. But you've got to, it's a management issue. Just as the Secretary said, it's an administrative management issue. You've got to ask the question, you've got to assign the people, you've got to put a priority on it, and then start sorting out whether it's critical or not critical.
How does the Year 2000 challenge affect a typical school? Well, we took a camera to a local Fairfax County public school, Flint Hill Elementary, where Principal Linda Clark and Assistant Principal Sal Rivera gave us a walking tour of all the systems at risk from the Millennium Bug. Let's watch that now.
Good afternoon and welcome to Flint Hill Elementary School, a Fairfax County public school located in Vienna, Virginia. I'm Linda Clark and this is my assistant, Sal Rivera.
Good afternoon.
We're here to give you an idea of some of the possible risks that Y2K could inflict upon an elementary school.
Why don't we head to the cafeteria and see what issues are there?
Terrific, thank you. One thing you might not be considering, but the refrigeration system that produces your students' lunches will be awfully important on that first day back. And Mr. Rivera.
Also, the billing system on the cafeteria, which uses snap cards for the cafeteria hostess to be able to report how many lunches and so on that are sold, is very important, because if they cannot tell how many lunches they've sold or how many free and reduced lunches there are available.
Either that or every child will get a free lunch that day.
That would be nice. I'm sure they'd be happy.
In this section of the building, we have a very sophisticated energy management system that controls all of the heat and air conditioning for our schools centrally. Mr. Rivera, you want to tell them about it?
Sure. This Network 8000 global control module lets us know and gives us vital information regarding the heating system. We can check all the temperatures throughout the building and make sure that it's a comfortable level. Can you imagine having 32 of these microzones available for the computer to check and make sure that everything is running at a comfortable temperature? These things, called microzones, are controlled by this computer and can look quite uncomfortable if you actually look at them. Let's give you a peek at that. But these microzones, what they do is they regulate the temperature, let us know what's happening throughout the building, and in the year 2000 issue is, if this falls down, it doesn't work, we have to manually override daily until someone takes care of that problem.
Each zone of the building to override.
Each zone of the building.
So if it's January 1st, it could be cold and icy in even Virginia.
We don't want to come into a cold building.
Okay, this is a 50s school brought up to code in 1995 through renovation. In the renovation process, of course, we have a sprinkler system in every classroom. This, our safety system, handles everything related to that. If we are automated and technologically fit, then we won't be issuing a request for all students to wear swimsuits in January the year 2000. A vital room in our school and in many schools is the communications room. Everything that is important about running our school, our fire and safety, our security system, the server for our LAN, local LAN, our server for our central LAN, the programming for our intercom, the telephone system, and cable system. I'm sure you know what would happen if we had a failure in our security system or in our fire safety system. Everybody be running out of the building. The fire engines would be coming. If we had a breakdown in our server, if we had breakdowns in our intercom system, we could even have the hurricane bell going off. Our telephone system, as you may know, the companies take care of us until it gets to the building. After it gets to the building, it's our problem. And then, of course, our cable system. All new things vital to education. Have you thought about the transportation system? Our buses that pick up and take home our children every day. The scheduling of these pickups and take-homes, communications between drivers and home, and even the speed in which the bus travels, all governed by computer chips.
The year 2000 issue doesn't only involve all the other things you've seen, but it also involves the library. There are many issues here. For example, there's no longer a card catalog. Students now will have to access the computers to be able to find the books, do searches, to find the correct books that they need to do their projects and their reports. They'll have to access the internet, and they'll have to find their book. Actually, here they have to find the book that they need and go find it on the shelf. The student will be able to locate whether or not we even have the book at our school.
We have 27 classrooms full of students. As you can see, this one is very full. And each one we're very fortunate to have with computers. These students are currently at work, studying about geography and spelling, I see. But much of their work is dependent upon saving their programs, saving their work. And if our computers are not compliant, then they will lose their hard work. I can't imagine a paperless elementary school office, but we're getting close. Automated student information systems handle our progress reports, all vital student information, attendance, and test scores. We also have all of our textbook ordering, maintenance, referrals through our computer system, also handled in the office. This is a very busy place for all of the background of the school, the things that make the classrooms function smoothly. As an elementary school, what we're about is instruction. Every day, children, kindergarten through 6th grade, their instruction is the most important thing. We are now living in an automated society. and technology is key to everything we do. It's a little bit hard to go back, like to that card catalog in the library. Instruction is dependent upon our compliant technology systems. So, take a look around your building and get in those dusty closets and find out how everything works if you haven't been there yet. And have a good new year, especially the year 2000.
You know, Linda Clark and Sal Rivera have a great attitude about approaching this very serious problem. Dan, what's your reaction to that when you're watching the school principal who knows every system in her little school?
I think I wish every principal in Dade County had that type of grasp of the issue. It would make it a lot easier for us. In lieu of that, I think it's important for the district to take the responsibility to inform school principals and train them to locate the very types of systems that are in their schools that may be impacted by this issue. That is part of a comprehensive impact analysis that I would strongly recommend be part of a plan for addressing this issue. That impact analysis looks at the systems that we saw described in the school and also leads employees of the district and the school toward solutions for renovating those systems as hopefully before they start to fail.
Mr. Secretary, are there any resources at the federal level that we can share with schools like Flint Hill?
Well, some reference was made to the guidelines that we have. We have a booklet for schools K through 12 and one for colleges and universities. And then we have our website, www.ed.gov, and you can get into it from there. And we are very far along in getting our department, as John pointed out, in pretty good shape. Out of some 175 systems, we have 166 that are completely compliant. So we think that now we really do need to try to help others to become compliant, and we want to serve that purpose. So we can be reached through those sources. Also, if you want a copy of one of the guidelines, 1-800-USA-LEARN, and then we would send one out to you.
Great, that's good to know. We have a call from San Francisco. Do you have a question?
Yes. What is the role that schools and colleges can play in educating people about community and individual preparedness?
I'll throw that out to our panel.
Well, we have a series of working groups, and one of our working groups started out focusing on the nonprofit sector and has sort of expanded into community preparedness. And there are a number of wonderful examples around the country of educational institutions being the core or the focal point for just that kind of an activity, working with local government, local businesses, local emergency response organizations, bringing everyone together and deciding to analyze what the problem is, what the progress is in dealing with the problem, and what preparations need to be made for what may be inevitable but hopefully minor inconveniences that result. As Dan was noting, you have to start with your emergency response plan and then figure out how does it operate. So a number of the land-grant colleges have been terrific sources of technical information, and in fact one of the things we've encouraged others to do is what the department is doing, is to share information about what works, where the problems are, what the difficulties are, what the fixes are. And we've encouraged the states to similarly get information sharing, and even school districts to cooperate with each other and share information about where they have found the problems, how they've dealt with them, what their emergency response plans are, so that everybody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel.
Bob, how's that working in Washington? You have all that high-tech industry out there. It would seem that that's a wonderful resource.
I need to say, you know, it's very concerning to me, the headlines we're starting to see in the press, like this morning in the Washington Post, where the people who are going out into the desert and they're selling their home, they're so afraid of it. I think school teachers affect the opinion in a community. Easily 1 out of every 4 families is affected with school. They have kids in school. And if we can explain to teachers what this problem is and work through kids, I think we can influence the community's impact and maybe lessen some of the panic. Because right now the companies that are affected very heavily know about it, and most of them, almost all, are working it. The public doesn't know that. They're beginning to think nobody's working this thing, and the press is kind of building that up. So I think we're going to play a real critical role with the community and with the local chambers, the local mayor, city councils, and the people that supply services to the whole community, and we're just one of them.
We have a very nuts and bolts question coming to us from Tampa, Florida. Go ahead.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Our home computer is used by my husband for our small business. How do I get the technology to fix this problem? And does that impact our car, which uses microchips for some systems, and also home appliances? How do I deal with this as just a average, everyday person?
Those are good questions. As a general matter, we also have a website. Everybody's got a website. Ours is meant to be a basically directory for people to use, and you can find it at www.y2k.gov. Fairly easy to remember. As a general matter, household appliances will be fine unless they happen to be wired up into a very avant-garde household control system that has a computer that runs everything. But in the normal sense, your VCR, your televisions, heating and air conditioning systems will be fine as you go forward. And I think that with regard to the equipment that you use, an increasingly large number of companies, hardware producers and sellers and software sellers, have their own websites in which, while some of them were a little late getting started, most of them now will tell you the list of their equipment, what's compliant now, what is not compliant, and how to fix it. And oftentimes you can download a fix directly from the web. And then they'll tell you the category of equipment that is so old or outdated in terms of generations that it's no longer supported, and in that case you have to replace it. But the thing to do is not necessarily go to your retailer, who may not know. If you go directly to the companies that made the hardware, that made the software, they will have the information available for you. And as we near the end of this year, we will announce a 1-800 number nationally that will be designed primarily for consumers so that you can call and get further information about just these kinds of questions.
Great. And John, once again, your webpage address is?
The webpage address is www.y2k.gov.
Great. Dan, we mentioned earlier that a lot of folks had faxed us questions previous to the show airing, and I want to share one of those with you now. It's from Donna Zingelman in the Aurora Public Schools. She asked, what are the needs of technical support staff in terms of training, installation, instruction time, resources, etc.? And what have you done in Miami to make sure all of your staff is willing and ready to take on the challenge?
We had a significant training issue with this problem.
Sure.
Surprisingly enough, it wasn't in the area where most people would have expected it. Mainframe systems, we knew what the problem was, we knew where the problem was, we knew how to fix it. It was a matter of dedicating resources to do it. Renovations of personal computers posed a significant issue for us, and we had to train a staff to do that because we, like most districts, have a significant number of PCs in the field, and we had to test and renovate each one. So that was a technical training problem, and we addressed that by going into regions and schools and training individual staff people to do those renovations. An area where we might have benefited from training that we didn't apply until too late was in project management. As the Secretary said early on, this is a management issue, and we could have benefited from better training in designing and managing a project of this scope with this type of variability. Would have saved us from a number of surprises. So I think to take a step back and train some managers in assessing a project and developing one and then implementing it would be very useful to districts.
You know, it's got to be, because when you look at it, again, the little school like Flint Hill Elementary that has all those systems within that one little school, what a management nightmare it could turn out to be unless you really got your ducks in a row. Very quickly, when you tested those systems, what happened?
Well, in many cases, the systems tested fine. They were certified, and when they were put into production, they didn't work. So a significant part of this issue is to build time into your project to do testing of interfaces that you cannot predict until you go into production. And to spend time on finding possible solutions for those interface type issues. And in the end, with many both mainframe and site-based applications. I think it's the interfaces that are going to take us the most time to repair. You need time to recognize that, and you also, and this was critical for us as well, need to be able to recognize that it's possibly the interface that's creating a problem for you. And that bedeviled us on a number of occasions.
You know, Mr. Secretary, schools are so crunched for resources, teachers and educators are so crunched for time. I would guess, Dan, it's probably been your experience that some people don't want to devote a lot of time to this because they say you're taking time away from learning and putting it on this sort of ethereal to them at this point Y2K issue. How do you address that problem?
Well, you simply have to deal with it. As Dan pointed out, a lot of the resources are people and time, and that is a problem. And that does take them off of other things. But it simply has to be dealt with. You know the deadline, you know that it has to be done, and once it's done and in place, then you're finished with it. It's not a permanent, long-term matter, but you do have to put the resources to it. And as these people have pointed out very graphically, the sooner the better. I mean, the earlier, the easier it will be.
Just like in school, don't wait till the last minute and cram for the test,
That's
in other
right.
words, right? Bob, how do you find qualified technical folks who can deal with some of these now arcane systems that are the problem?
Yeah, there's a number of answers that are emerging. It's been tough because the people, you know, you're a good year and a half away when a lot of these, when we got started in it. Attending conferences, you'll see certain people hold themselves up as experts. The state associations are starting to keep lists of names of consultants. You can write RFPs and put them out to the major vendors, you know,
Some
the
people
major
may not,
consultants.
excuse me, some people may not know what RFPs are.
Oh,
so just-
request for proposal.
Thanks.
You essentially say, here's my problem, I'd like some help on it. So consultants kind of come out of the woodwork. You need to, I think, look for people who have had a good programming background and understand embedded chips, how they're made, and how this problem originated. Because it's kind of like, I heard Larry Briquette say, a consultant say, it's like polishing marbles. It's real simple to do. You give you 20 marbles, you polish them. But then you take them over to the Rose Bowl Stadium and it's full of marbles. Okay? That's the magnitude of the problem. It may be easy to solve, but you got to get on it and you got to start doing it.
And you don't want to lose your marbles over it, John. So what other resources are you working on the federal level?
Well, I think the most important resource, besides time, which we have a limited supply of, is information. And what we have been trying to do is provide as many sources of information, technical information as well as management information as we can to people. And Dan makes an important point for anybody watching. As you can tell, and the video was wonderful that way too, this is not just an information processing problem. It's not just the software you use. It is, in fact, all of the operations you're engaged in. And anyone who is running this only off on the side with their technical people or only with their chief information officers is making a mistake. You have to look at it in terms of all of your business operations. The Congress, to its credit, passed this fall a bill that the President introduced called the Year 2000 Information Disclosure and Readiness Bill, which basically provides that anyone who voluntarily shares information, a school district, a company, about how to fix the problem, how to deal with products, how to test them, can't have those statements used against them, even if they're not 100% correct, because in this field nobody knows what's 100% correct. So we're now trying to work with, again, the umbrella organizations, the educational organizations, as well as others, to have them assemble websites with best practices, technical information, so that school districts and universities that may be starting late, again, don't have to start at square one, can take advantage of the experience of others who are running the similar kind of systems or similar kind of operations. And we hope over the next 3 or 4 months that there will be more of that information available.
And how about the job bank?
A good question. When we started, we were very concerned, from the federal standpoint first and then for the country, about the lack of skills available because, as Bob noted, everybody's retired who knows how to deal with these things. So the Labor Department had a job bank up, and in cooperation with the American Association of Retired People and all of the federal agencies, we now have a job bank of people who are retired programmers or managers who have dealt with information technology, who are available and willing to provide services, in some cases voluntarily, in other cases obviously for pay, in the areas in which they've retired. And we have now thousands of people who are available, who have experience by definition, because they were here in the 50s and 60s. And we've encouraged people to go to that job bank who need assistance.
That's a terrific resource. Dan, what has been your biggest obstacle?
Surprisingly enough, our largest obstacle was the application of non-conventional problem solving to this particular issue. You encounter situations with this where the normal mechanism for solving a problem is gone through by your staff, and you still don't understand why a particular system isn't working effectively, or why the interfaces are not connecting. And then it dawns on somebody in the room, maybe this is a Y2K issue. As sensitive as we were to this, or have been for the past 2 years, we think in routine ways. We ended up building a Y2K working group whose function it was to process issues that came through our office in these terms, to look for these implications first so that we could address them quickly. If not, in many cases, we were spending a significant amount of time and money running through problems where the solutions were there for us, but we just weren't used to grabbing them. The sensitivity that you need with this issue, I think, it demands a tremendous amount of flexibility. It demands a capacity to apply variable thinking, and while we say we do that very well, in fact, it eludes us sometimes.
Bob, can it get a little dicey politically when the schools there's this undercurrent at the school level that something needs to be done, but the school board hasn't grabbed the bull by the horns yet?
Yeah, there's a number of school boards that just kind of ignore things and leave it to the administration.
You got the secretary chuckling over here.
They're very independent. They're well-meaning people, but they don't perceive the magnitude of the problem, or they don't want to look into it. The state association, school board association, the National School Board Association has been holding workshops and discussions on it, and I know Pennsylvania has done a lot, and a few states around have. But it is difficult to get people on it, and I guess teleconferences like this, dealing with superintendents to bring it up at board meetings and legitimize what they're doing. And also, once you solve your own problem, you go through and you figure out what's critical, what isn't critical, and you fix it. Then you start having to ask your community, the power grids coming into you, how are they being affected? There are all these different people involved, and we seem to run everything with lay citizens in this country. It's always outsiders trying to run things. And it's a good system, but it does mean it could potentially get slow on a major issue. This is a time-critical issue. You've got to have it done by a certain time, so you better get on it.
What's the one thing that keeps you up at night when you worry about how this problem is going to affect your school district?
Well, the schools are still going to open. The kids are going to be, and we have had meetings with the most critical feeder, and that is the power. That we have heat, electricity, and those people have absolutely assured us that they've tested things, and the worst case is going to be a brownout. They're telling us, but they've got backups for that. Well, now we know we're going to be open. And then we start working from there into the bus systems, the engine maintenance, and you just work right down through it. We got down into elevators that may think that it's a Saturday when it's actually a Monday, and they lock up wrong. Like they have a different weekend schedule than they do for an elevator on a weekday. So you start getting into it's like peeling layers off of an onion. You know how your eyes water, as you get deeper into it. But once you get to it, you start looking at who's feeding you, and you start working with your local mayors and city councils and power grid folks.
Dan, anything that continues to be a worry for you?
No, I think the best way to approach this problem, the best way to avoid panic is to be focused. And that focus comes out of having a plan and following it. I mean, we're very comfortable that in 113 days and a few hours, we're going to certify this school district as compliant. And then we're going to have time, and that's the key. Have a plan, and then have time to monitor that plan and be able to react to outside forces. If you approach it as a management issue and are ready for it, it should be fine.
Well, good luck to both of you. It's not an easy problem to solve by any stretch. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Bob. It's time to move our discussion to the higher education community. We're about to meet a panel of college and university officials. But first, as we've already seen, the Millennium Bug presents management as well as technical challenges. How does an institution such as a college or university prepare? We prepared a report on the University of Iowa's Team 2000 approach. Let's watch.
The year 2000 phenomenon poses enormous challenges for colleges and universities all across America. Campuses today are almost universally reliant on computer and chip technology for everything from admissions to student registration to academic records. Here at the University of Iowa, officials have risen to the Y2K challenge. They've come up with an effective plan for assessing the dimensions of the task and resolving it in such a way that key systems will continue processing data immediately after the century turns.
Well, we've basically taken the attitude that we're going to put whatever resources it takes, that we cannot have this fail. I mean, we must have the problem solved, at least for the mission critical issues at the university. So we basically said whatever it takes we'll do. We think in the end it's going to cost us somewhere between $3 and $4 million.
As a first step, the university established Team 2000, a special task force to act as a clearinghouse for all information on the size of the problem and on the status of solutions and corrective measures. Heading up the team is Sue Nichols, who has been with the university for 20 years as a systems analyst.
As with all businesses, all our school systems and our colleges and universities around the country have automated our everyday business processes. We at the University of Iowa have over 500 departments, academic and administrative, and we did know that we had to get to each and every department and to each and every staff member.
Involving every department and much of the staff has been the key ingredient in the Team 2000 plan. Each department has been given a common strategy that involves certain steps. First, each department must establish an assessment team and a preliminary timeline for completing their task. Each department team must identify systems at risk and prioritize them from the most critical to the least. That means that each team member has to be assigned specific tasks.
It's very important that they be assigned and that each person understand what their obligations and responsibilities are. And what we did is had a kickoff meeting at the very beginning to identify the roles and responsibilities of each individual, both the coordinator, the Y2K coordinator, and the Y2K liaison folks in the business units. And I would say that it's absolutely a must that they understand what their roles and responsibilities are.
Next, each department team needs to assess just how compliant are the various systems with the Y2K standards. For the ones not compliant, the team must come up with a plan for resolving the situation, starting with the systems that are the most critical.
I think it's important that individuals that have been assigned to particular areas pay great attention to detail. There are always things that can be overlooked, and oftentimes those things are not identified at the very beginning stages. And I think without being specific, one needs to afford enough time in the calendar that one puts together to have the outcome accomplished by a said time, that there is a fudge factor, if you will, in there as one comes about unexpected urgencies.
Team 2000 coordinates all of the information from all of the departments. Then, the team makes decisions about which systems get priority in an overall plan for resolving all of the systems.
It has been extremely beneficial for us to have a central point on campus for information to flow to and from our university staff. Team 2000 members answer questions from our liaisons, and although each and every department is responsible for assessing and remediating their equipment, they know we are there to help.
And in the final analysis, will all of this make a difference at midnight on December 31st, 1999?
We'll be able to pay people, we'll have water, we'll have electricity, we'll have lights, elevators will work. Will every little system be fixed? Probably not. I think there are things that we've not anticipated, and we may be surprised, but we're going to be as ready as we can be.
No one knows for certain exactly what will happen in those first few moments of the year 2000, nor the extent of the problem that will arise from the so-called millennium bug. But the University of Iowa demonstrates that a good plan can go a long way toward a good solution.
Let's meet our next panel. Pam Fowler is the Director of Financial Aid at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where she is working to assure that her office is Y2K ready by February 1999. Carol Campbell is Vice President and Treasurer of Carleton College, a liberal arts college in Northville, Minnesota, with about 1,900 students. She's involved with the National Association of Colleges and University Business Officers. And John Moore is Vice President for Technology at Dyersburg State Community College in Dyersburg, Tennessee. He coordinates the year 2000 issues across the campus and regularly speaks in the community to raise awareness on this issue. Let's begin with a question for Carol. It seems from the story that we just watched on the University of Iowa that the first step is to get organized. What have you done at Carleton College, and should the approach to that organization be different from that of a large university?
Getting organized is certainly the first step, and it's a huge hurdle to get over. We have a number of teams that are coordinated out of my office working on the Y2K issue. First and foremost are the computing departments. They are responsible for the infrastructure within the system, the networks, the servers. They are responsible for the administrative systems, right down to assisting and helping departments who have unique equipment or software within their systems. The second piece that we look at, however, is the issue of the embedded chips, the issues of the equipment that we have on campus and whether that will continue to work. And there, and particularly to underscore the fact that Y2K is not just a computer problem, we've settled the responsibility within the central department that is essentially most close to the issue. For example, our facilities department is charged with all building mechanicals, security systems, elevators, maintenance systems. Our telecommunications department then heads up and looks at the communications system. The third major piece of Y2K are looking at non-computer systems that are critical to the mission and who we depend on and rely on outside of our own college. And again, there we've organized by department, so that, as an example, our HR department has been in communication with our pension plan sponsor, with our health service provider, to make sure that we will not suffer interruption of key services.
So it's really keeping on everybody who has the potential to have any involvement in this at all. It's almost like mobilizing an army.
It is. It's a huge communication and coordination effort.
Walkie-talkies yet on campus?
No, not quite
yet.
to that point.
John, if a college, large or small, has not started its plan, is it too late?
Well, we've tried to make it clear to everybody it's never too late to start. It may be too late to finish, but it is important to start because the work that has to be done has to be done. And if you say, well, it's too late, I'll just wait and see what happens, you'll lose. There are 389 days left, but who counts, until we get to the end of next year. And there's 389 days worth of work that can be done. And so wherever you are, if you're listening and you think, gee, I'll never get it done, sooner or later you will, and the time to start is today. And wherever you are, you'll be 389 days ahead of the game if you do the work from now till then.
John, how are you coordinating this effort from your office down in Dyersburg?
As Vice President for Technology, I am the coordinator of the committee that's responsible for making the institution Y2K compliant. We started with a committee consisting of representing all the major parts of the college, like the plant, the physical plant, the business office, the human resources office, the people that support instruction, instructors, other areas of the campus. So we started with a checklist of trying to define where our problems could be, going through our embedded systems in our physical plant, looking at our administrative systems, which have already been converted because we're using a central system with other community colleges and universities within the state, and we'll be testing those later, and looking at all our microcomputers, our networks. So we started there and then started our priority list of what had to be done, and we replaced some systems and others we're upgrading software, so there's just a number of things going on.
How do you possibly keep track of the minutia in this?
You keep detailed records. You go back, for example, in the software area, you look at every software item on our central system. We made a list, looked at all our vendors and said which ones are supposedly Year 2000 compliant by their web page. We did the same thing in all areas of the institution. Like on our elevators, we went back to the company, Otis, that made them, and they said because of the age, they have no microprocessors. And so we went through our mechanical systems, our heating and cooling systems. They don't have any microprocessors. So it's just a process of elimination with detailed records.
Now, Pam, your office, that's the real nail biter. We're talking money. We're talking, is the money coming in? Is the money going out? What kind of issues are you dealing with right now?
Well, we're about to convert to our Y2K compliant system, and that was very important, the timing in which we do things. We wanted to make sure we could test, after we completely tested the system, that when we go live, we wanted to go live with a disbursement that we felt we could manage if something did happen. So we wanted to make sure our first disbursement was a small one before we go to the winter semester, and we didn't want any problems with the largest disbursement we run during the year. So we wanted to make sure that the timing was correct. So we planned and we prepared for that, and we have a contingency plan for that. I also say it's very important that we kept our supervisor apprised of what was happening and if we were making or were not making deadlines, coordinated very carefully with other offices, the student accounting office, the admissions office, housing, those kinds of things, so we know that we'll have the information we need to properly disperse and that our systems would be ready. And it's probably a good time to have a plan A, B, and C. I usually go with the plan A and B. Now I think I'd feel comfortable if I had A, B, and C. And I think we have a responsibility to assure our students and parents that everything will go as smoothly as possible when the time comes.
So your test run, how many students are affected?
We're hoping to do no more than about 200. It'll be our final disbursement for the fall semester, and that's usually very small. A week or so later, we could be talking about 21,000 students, and we don't want to test anything or run anything the first time when we're dispersing to over 20,000
Now,
students.
not trying to put you on a real hot seat here, but what happens if nothing happens, if it doesn't go well?
Well, we just have to assure students that it will go well as soon as possible, and we can get it up and running as soon as possible. That would be the plan C, and we haven't quite worked plan C out yet.
That's all right. It's an ongoing issue. That's what
Hopefully
we were
we won't
talking
get to
about.
that.
That's exactly right. We have a call from Lincoln, Nebraska. You have a question?
Yes. Am I on?
You are.
My question relates to universities that have, and most universities do have complex networks, multiple email systems, intranet. Could someone in the panel comment about how to go about testing those kind of environments?
John?
I would say you would start out with your vendors of your network, all your routers and hubs, and for example, Cisco has quite a few routers out there, and they provide information on the latest release, which is Y2K compatible. You'll have to go back to your internet provider to see about their network. Those are the major things.
Would you like to follow up on that?
Yes. We're doing that, or in many cases have done that. My question is on how to test and validate what we've heard from our vendors as okay or not okay.
Right, and that's a good point because sometimes they'll say, sure, everything's fine. But Carol, have you had that experience where you've tested some things and...
I think everybody's had that experience. I think you know that you are not certain until you test, and even then, you're not certain. But rigorous testing is certainly a key part of it.
I think on the network devices, you'll have to isolate parts of your network, take a group of micros and routers and hubs and put them together, take them off of the intranet and the internet so you can do specific testing on those groups of devices.
We have a question again that was faxed in. Donna in Aurora, Colorado asks, if your network is Y2K compatible, how does that affect the individual computers on the network, and how do you test for that? John, what's been your experience with that?
Well, it's a good question. In fact, when we first started, we talked to the National Science Foundation and others who had developed the Internet, and their basic studies were that the Internet would be fine, but it didn't mean at all that people would guarantee access. In other words, it would depend upon the access in the gateways and the individual computers. So you could have a very good structure operating, just as we may have international and national telecommunications that work fine, but if your local on-premises equipment isn't fixed, or you've got telephones equipment or sets or voicemail systems, there's no guarantee that any one part of it that has access to a compliant system will work. So there's really no shortcut to testing every piece of equipment, making sure that you know from the manufacturers of the equipment and the software what their view is of the compliance. And then, as we noted, we hope that there will be an increasing information sharing network among people in similar circumstances, so that colleges and universities, we hope, will begin to share their experience and their information. Local school boards, school systems will say, our experience with these products is these worked and these didn't in these kinds of configurations, and if we get more and more of that data out on the network for exchange, I think that will help people substantially.
You know, John, you mentioned sharing. It would seem that you all are probably being looked at as a resource within the community when churches and maybe the local school systems are looking to you all saying, John Moore at Dyersburg, help, I don't know what we're doing here.
We've had a number of community organizations, particularly Kiwanis Club and Rotary clubs and churches, ask for information about the problem. I've gone out and presented the definition of the problem, talked about what they can do as community people, like talking to your local government. Are they making sure that their government computers are Y2 compliant, talking to your local power company, to your water company, to other groups to make sure that they can be a valid citizen, to try to make sure the community is fulfilling their need in the Y2K area.
How do you think the rest of the community as a whole is doing on this?
It depends on the part of the country you're looking at. For example, our electric utility company says they're totally compliant. Our water department says they are. But if you listen to national presentations, there's different cities around the country in Texas and other places that are doing a wonderful job of making sure they have backup power if the power's down for a short time and other things, whereas some cities are not.
Is that your experience, Mr. Secretary, when you're traveling around the country, that it's a really hot topic in some areas, and in some areas it's a subject that is not broached?
Yes, I think so. However, it's getting hotter. And I think everybody really is tuned in now, but some are way in advance of others. I think it's important, too, that wherever the community, universities and college people are leaders in the community. And so it's true also with school people, school board members and superintendents and so forth. So I do think there's a community responsibility. We have a theme in my department that education is everybody's business. And I think we could safely say Y2K is everybody's business also, and that education leaders really should try to serve as leaders in the community, as John pointed out.
Carol, is that something you're trying to do at Carleton? To share the information that you all are gleaning from your systems and translate that down to other areas in the community?
Absolutely. Whether it's working with the local Girl Scout Council or swapping information with the Northfield City Hospital, the communication continues to just build and build and build as we get closer.
Pam, especially with the financial institutions and the systems that you're having to deal with, have you had some breakthroughs that you consider best practices, or some things that you think, this really worked?
I don't think I have any breakthroughs. I would have some advice that you probably need to monitor this very closely. People in my position, directors of departments, are probably not the ones that are closest to this issue, but you need to make sure that you're getting updates from your assistant director, associate director, whomever's in charge of your system, so that you can garner additional resources if needed to if they run into any problems. If you're not meeting deadlines, you need to know that so that you can let your supervisor know that. I would think that's probably where I didn't do as good a job as I could have done a little early on in monitoring. Now I'm getting like every 48 hours I want to report.
We're learning as we go, aren't we? John, you want to follow up on that?
Pam raises a good point. Normally, and certainly in Washington, we're all used to that, what you don't want to do is have bad news. The messenger gets shot a lot around here. And I think what all of us need to do...
Or at least maimed.
That's right. I think what all of us need to do in any organization you're running is recognize Pam's point. Somebody told me once on this problem, the higher up you go in any organization, the better off they're doing. And I said, I gather you're troubled by that algorithm. And what we've stressed to the departments, and I think you all need to stress to your organizations, is the people who are most valuable are the people who tell you where the problems are. They tell you, we thought that system worked, and now it turns out not to. So we need to encourage people at the grassroots, at the front lines, the people who know what's going on, to give really candid information, and we ought to really honor the people who tell us where the problems are, in addition to the people who say we're already done.
That is a very good point. We have a question from Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, about embedded chips.
Yes, that's embedded chip technology.
Thank you.
You mentioned 2 or 3 times throughout the show, and I didn't really explain too much about it. What I was curious is, what is it exactly, and what is the best way to check for it as far as setting up a plan or about actually going about doing it?
John?
Go back to your vendors that are providing your systems that have embedded chips. A system like a heating and cooling system within a campus would have embedded chips, possibly elevators could. All kind of devices have embedded chips, like your home appliances. Certainly VCRs and so forth, which would not be as large a concern as like an elevator or a heating and cooling system. So go back to your vendor to find out, and to your documentation on the system to see whether or not it has an embedded chip. If so, is it year 2000 compliant? And you may have to go back beyond that to the vendor or the manufacturer that made it.
And then, as we've heard a couple of people say today, don't stop even there, retest, don't take their word for it. Because they may think it's just fine and it may very well not be, right? John, what do you say to organizations, certainly colleges and universities, but other organizations as well, who don't want to spend the money on this, or are really grappling with, it's a tremendous expense?
Well, it is. And I sometimes get asked, well, what additional funds are there for this project? Which oftentimes leads me to include that people don't understand the magnitude of the problem. This is not an additional project you're undertaking as an IT project. This is a question that goes to the fundamental ability of your organization to function and to continue to function. So what you have to ask is, what else could we be doing that has a higher priority than ensuring that our operation, our company, our program, our organization can continue to deliver its basic services and products that people expect and rely upon? So it really is, in most organizations that have now devoted resources to it, a situation of not do we have enough resources, it is what else could we be spending the money on that would be more important, and priorities have to get set. Some projects that are important have to be delayed. Most companies have done that. They have not provided new money. They basically said, we have a budget, this is our highest priority, we'll spend whatever it takes to get it done, we'll put as many people on it as it takes to get it done, because we cannot afford to fail. And my greatest concern is about those who have said either it's not our problem and not understood that it's everybody's problem, or who say, we'll wait and see what breaks and then we'll fix it. And that's a great roll of the dice in terms of whether you're going to be able to continue to be in business. Because if nothing else, if you wait and then you decide that you're going to replace whatever doesn't work, you may be at the end of a very long line of people also waiting to buy that same replacement part, and you may be able to get it and it'll work just fine, and it'll show up in June of the year 2000.
That may be a little late. Carol, what about that? Let me just follow up on that. Is it a battle, though, you have a limited budget?
Absolutely. It's one of the greatest challenges. We were very fortunate at Carleton because we knew that we had many major administrative systems that were non-compliant, and we began years ago so that we could replace those over time and essentially absorb the budget impact over a number of years. Beyond the funding, though, another critical component that there's a great shortage of is staffing. We have been chronically understaffed for quite a while, and it's very difficult to free up the staff and to have staff available to concentrate on Y2K.
We have a question from Huntsville, Alabama.
Good morning. This
Hi.
is Lee McPeter from Huntsville, Alabama. My subject pertains to software. There are hundreds of pieces of software that are used in our local school district, In order to determine their compliance, it takes many, many man-hours. The same is true at the state level in all states. To question Dr. Riley, would you please have a list of all general software that educators can use, researched and determined compliant on your net, so we could pull this down rather than having to individually research this and do it at the district and school level?
Well, that's an interesting suggestion, and I'll certainly take a look at it. My acting deputy, Mike Smith, is going to be on in the next panel. Mike is really in charge of that for our department, and that's a very interesting challenge. And if it would be helpful and if it's doable, we would certainly take a look at it. But that's a very constructive suggestion, and perhaps we can ask Mike to take a look at it this afternoon.
Great. Thank you very much, sir.
Good.
As we've said so many times today, this is truly a management issue, isn't it?
It sure is.
When we're talking to parents of kids who are attending your schools, have the questions started to come in, is my youngster going to be safe, especially in a university, a college environment, when they're living on campus, and you'll start to read reports in the media about fire alarms not working, sprinkler systems not working, elevators getting stuck, and this doomsday scenario being sort of floated out there. Are you starting to get questions from parents? And if you are, what are you going to say to them?
It's an interesting question. And no, as far as I know, we have not gotten inquiries yet. Now, maybe our parents have wonderful confidence in Carleton. But you're making me think that we really should have communications materials available, because I'm sure that question is going to come soon.
John, you want to follow up on that?
We, being a community college, really have not had that much interest from parents. So I think we would answer them by telling them what we're doing, what our plan is, and the actions we've taken.
John, would you suggest colleges and universities to perhaps be proactive in that area?
Yes, I would. We've been encouraging everybody we deal with, in the private sector and the public sector internationally, to start to provide regular updates of information of where you are and where you're not. I think we all have an obligation to be candid with the public about what's going on, because I think that the most fundamental way to deal with the possibilities of overreaction wherever they might occur is for people to have basic information available. I think when people get concerned is when they don't know what's going on. The only information they have are the rumors or whatever is up on the website. And I think there's a lot of common sense in people if they have the right information. And so I think every organization needs to provide people with that information, even if you're not done. I think the public understands this is a complicated problem. Nobody's done yet. But I think what they need to know is you're managing against the problem, what your plan is, how you're dealing with it, what your goals and benchmarks are. And then I think they will be comfortable that if you run into a difficult problem or something that doesn't work, you will both be able to manage against it, and also you will keep them advised. And I think that will be appropriate for everybody.
Is anyone here, are your respective colleges and universities thinking about delaying the start of school because of this?
No. It's crossed my mind a number of times. I would be more comfortable if we had a week or two, but we're on a calendar where students are back right after the first of the year.
Sam?
To my knowledge, we don't have any plans. I was asked by the student newspaper, would we still be allowed to go to class if financial aid were not dispersed on the first day of class? And I said, I think that would be the least of our worries, is whether or not you go to class. You can always go to class.
John?
That would not be a problem, we do not think, on our campus. There's all schools within the Tennessee Board of Regents are using common software provided by SCT, and the Tennessee modifications have been put in that within the state, and there's been a lot of testing already gone on, so we feel like our administrative systems will be there, so we see no need to delay.
Nancy, Pam mentioned plan A, B, and C, or whatever, and I think that's important for people to realize too, that if you're really compliant, you have a contingency plan. Is that right, John? I mean, and so people shouldn't panic. That doesn't mean it's any less important, because it's very, very important. Probably the most important thing that we could be finishing up and doing. But people do have contingency plans. So I think we needn't to panic about it, and let's just get busy and get it done.
Good advice. Any final thoughts about some advice you would be quick to impart your colleagues at other schools across the country?
Get going if you haven't. There's a tremendous amount of help out there. Just the resource packet that was provided by the Department of Education has lots of information. Get your trustees, get your senior administrators involved right at the beginning. You need that sponsorship and interest. And get help wherever you can, particularly at small institutions. Our staffs are small. Our expertise is often limited on campus. Think out of the box. Perhaps you have trustees, or perhaps you have alumni who are in the business and can provide some support and help.
Great idea. Pam, any word to your fellow financial aid?
Well, my fellow financial aid colleagues should be almost at the end of this road, so I would hope that most of us are. When I face a problem like this, there's two things that really help me. One is information and the second is action, and I feel if I have enough information, then I'd know how to act. So you don't have as much information as you're comfortable with. I'd suggest that you get that and then sit down and plan on what you're going to do with that information, how you use it.
And John, finally, are there some instances where you can bring students into solving this problem?
One of the places we've used students is in our microcomputer labs. The state has provided from a company called Right Time a piece of software that can tell you whether or not a microcomputer is compliant. If not, it will make it compliant, adding information to the operating system.
That's terrific.
And another thing, we hear a lot about legal implications of the year 2000 problems. I think it would pay any institution to document everything you've done, particularly your interface and contracts with your partners like banks and others.
Great. John, any final thoughts on this?
Well, I think as we said, as the Secretary said when we started, this is a global problem. No one is unaffected. We're all in a global community together. And I think my encouragement to everybody listening is to focus, much as we are trying at the federal government, first on your own systems, try to make sure they work. Then take a look at all the systems you interface with, all your suppliers, all your vendors, and make sure that you're on the same wavelength with them. And then especially, as we said several times during the program thus far, look at the third tier. Educational institutions, as everyone has said, are critical parts and central parts of their communities, and we all need to reach out beyond our normal lines of communication and operations to think about what can we do in our communities to raise awareness, what can we do to provide support, what can we do to create a greater sense of community that we're all working together to solve this problem. And I think if we do that, we'll not only increase the chances there won't be difficulties, but we'll certainly increase the chances that we'll be able to deal with whatever problems there are effectively at the community level.
Well said. Mr. Secretary, any final thoughts?
Well, first of all, what interesting panel members we've had, and I wish everybody out there could emulate the kind of interest they've shown. The associations, as far as colleges and universities are concerned, probably would be another source. Just about all of them belong to one kind of association or another, or one dealing with financial aid or whatever. So that's probably another good source, but I would repeat our number 1-800-USA-LEARN to get our guidelines mailed to you, anybody that might not have them, and then our website, www.ed.gov, also would have that data on it.
Great. Thanks. Great advice, great information. Thanks, Pam, John, and Carol. We're going to discuss how the Department of Education is meeting the Y2K challenge, a subject we know is of keen interest to many in the education community that depend on the department's various systems for funding and for information. Secretary Riley and Mr. Koskinen are going to leave us now. Our thanks to you both, and soon we'll be joined by Deputy Secretary of Education Marshall Smith. As we begin that discussion, we'll take a look at a brief videotape that gives a status report on the U.S. Department of Education's systems.
At the U.S. Department of Education, assuring our systems work to serve schools and colleges across the country is top priority. Vital services such as helping disadvantaged students in Title I schools, providing student loans, and providing information on education are all potentially affected by the millennium bug. The good news is that the U.S. Department of Education is successfully meeting the year 2000 computer challenge. As of November 1998, 95% of the department's 175 mission-critical and non-critical systems were Y2K compliant and in use. 14 systems have been deemed mission-critical. These are the systems that distribute grants and funds from Congress to improve schools, provide loans and grants to students pursuing higher education, manage responsibly the department's money for the most effective uses, and communicate with our partners in the education community, and in other ways deliver funds and information to students and schools. All 14 systems will be compliant and implemented by the end of March 1999. Renovation is complete for 12 of our 14 mission-critical systems, and testing is underway to assure everything will be ready when the calendar reaches the year 2000. In fact, 98% of non-critical systems, including mailing lists, voicemail, and work tracking systems, are already compliant and in use. Understanding that unforeseen problems may arise at the turn of the century, the department is creating a contingency plan for every system, mission-critical or non-critical. For more detailed information on the Education Department's Y2K compliance efforts, please visit our website at www.ed.gov/Y2K.
We're back with Deputy Secretary Marshall Smith. Mike, you've been managing the Y2K effort at the Department of Education. Tell us about the department's progress and what it means for schools and colleges around the nation.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of our listeners and watchers. It's an extraordinary turnout, and I think that indicates the magnitude, the importance of the problem, as well as just general interest. As the video showed, and I guess as Mr. Koskinen mentioned earlier, the Department of Education is on a good track. We are going to make the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, deadlines for the fixing of our systems by March, by the end of March, and so on. What the video didn't show, however, was the hard work that went into it to get there, and the hard work that we still have to go on. The dedication of a large number of people out there, including the person who is running our effort, Nina Winkler, and the people in the Student Financial Aid Office and in a lot of other places throughout the department. It has really been a department-wide effort. We've had sessions where the folks who are in charge of this have reported to me once a week on a regular basis, and we go over in a great deal of detail the kinds of activities and efforts that they've gone through and whether or not something has slipped. The video also didn't show the problems that we've run into, and we've run into any number of problems. In fact, it's kind of a joke because we expect a problem a week to come up. Just one example I think is very instructive. We had 4 of our major systems. These are large systems run by major companies out there. We had 4 of our systems that were certified as compliant. We went out and tested them, and we found out that in fact they were not compliant. These were systems that were certified as built compliant, not just compliant after fixing. So we went out there, found that they were not compliant, and went through quite a lot of effort actually to fix those systems. So you got to expect the problems. The next stages can be summed up in 3 major words, and it's testing, testing, testing. We've got to go out, we've got to test our systems again and again. We've got to look at a cross-system testing, and we've got to go out and test with our partners. And finally, we have to look at contingency planning, which is what happens if all of this work ends up with the whole thing not working or parts of it not working when we hit January 1st or even before, when it's possible some of it won't work. And that contingency planning has to be done in conjunction with our partners and with people all around the country. So we have a lot still ahead of us, even though we're looking pretty good right now in terms of the fixing of the specific systems. The effort here, I think, that we've really got to do, however, is not just working on our systems. It's also working with our partners to ensure that their systems operate, because if we don't connect with each other, then we fail. We can't deliver student aid. We can't deliver the kinds of grants and contracts and so on if we can't communicate with our partners. So we are launching a major effort now to reach out, to instruct, to work with, to inform, to learn from, all of those things in order to really try to ensure that the number of our partners and us that have problems in the future are really at a minimum. And for even those situations that we have a good contingency plan in place so we can deliver student aid, for example, or deliver the grants and contracts.
Mike, when you started out heading up this project, you knew it was going to be big. Did you have any idea how big?
I don't believe I had any idea at all. That's right. I think I think John Koskinen mentioned this, that the effort has grown and grown and grown, and we have increased the size of our budget attributed to this every year in significant percentages. 50% one year, 75% another year, 10 or 15% a third year. As I mentioned, there are surprises everywhere. There were surprises in our intranet system, system that connects the desktops of all of the people in the department and that connects us with the outside world in major ways. We found out that our routers were not compliant, that some of our software was not compliant in the systems, that many of our computers, that many of the desktop computers were not compliant. And so we ended up saying, finally, heck with this, let's just replace the whole system rather than trying to replace little parts. And it turned out that replacement, which was a very good thing for us to do, is going to make us have a much stronger system, but it turned out to be very necessary in the context of Y2K.
That was, I would guess, a pretty rude surprise when you...
It was, and it all happened within the last 6 or 8 months. So this has not been a well-planned exercise where you lay out every contingency from the beginning and then check them off as you go. In fact, those check-off charts, your lists of to-do, expand and change and get more and more challenging with every week.
What occurs to me is when you're talking about this is here was a department that really took the bull by the horns, really made a concerted effort to deal with this problem with plenty of time, and still the snafus that were hit could in no way have been anticipated.
Well, that's largely right. We actually didn't start when we should have started. We should have started back in early 1996 and really worked up a much more thorough plan than we did for that year. We really didn't get underway until 1997, but that's still 2.5 to 3 years. And now if somebody hasn't started, we're only, I forget what the number of days is, but it's a year and a month away from the year 2000. And in fact, for many, the kinds of concerns that we have, we're going to have year 2000 problems occurring much earlier because we're moving into the 1999-2000 school year. People are putting financial aid applications now starting in January,
right.
February of this coming year, so a month and a half. We have to be ready to use the 4-digit dates in a variety of different ways. And the problem here is that we don't know in some situations exactly when the concern is going to kick in. And so we have to be ready as early as possible, and we have to have those contingency plans in place.
Well, that just goes to reiterate what John Koskinen was saying, that if you have bad news in your organization, be it the government or the private sector, that you're going to need to go ahead and address it and not kill the messenger and realize that this is a problem that has evolving solutions, that we can't just say, I thought you told me that this was going to work this way, and again, not blame the messenger. But we talked at the beginning of the show about folks who had faxed in questions, and Mike, I want to give you a couple of these that you can respond to. Heidi Wilker at Baltimore City Community College asked about the status of the U.S. Department of Education software in Y2K compliance. You briefly addressed that, but if you want to say...
Right. It was a very good question, and we can certainly look into the possibility of our carrying out some sort of or carrying on our website some sort of list. But in the meantime, what she should do is take a look at her manufacturer, take a look at her manufacturer's website. If she's got the model number on the software and the name of the software, she ought to be able to look it up on that manufacturer's website. If it turns out that there's no information on that website, I would be very cautious if I were her, because that might mean that the program is not compliant. But for many of them, there will be, in fact, good information on the websites.
That's a very good piece of advice. Jack Gavin at Monmouth, I'm sorry if I just absolutely butchered the name of that, University asks, is the GAPS, Ed Express, and Ed Connect systems, will they be operational on January 1st, 2000?
The answer to that is absolutely yes.
Great. We like those answers. We have a question from William Pollock, principal of High Technology High School. I bet they're dealing with this as part of their curriculum, I would guess. He faxed us a question asking if there are grant monies available for schools and districts to assist in alleviating the expenses in meeting the Y2K challenge.
There are not directly grant monies from the Department of Education for that purpose. There are some states which have provided money for these purposes in their regular appropriations through their state legislatures and things, but the Department of Education itself doesn't provide grant money.
Okay, Mike, let's go back. What is, just for the nuts and bolts of this, what is the department's testing process?
Well, it's complicated, and it goes way back at least a year, perhaps a year and a half. First part of testing, of course, is to determine what the problems are. It's assessment, it's called normally in Y2K lingo. But there's a lot of testing at that point where you get a really good handle on what the issues are with a particular system. It then moves to kind of continuous testing while you're updating, while you're improving, while you're changing, while you're fixing the system itself. After a while, when you've decided you've fixed particular systems, you move into testing between two systems for business processes. So two systems that interact with each other. You also have to test all the interconnections that you have. We have a large number of connections to other parts of the government. We get information from Social Security. We get information from the IRS. We get information from a number of different places which feed back into our system. So we have to make sure that when we send out a request for that information, it comes back in a reasonable way. And that's something we have to test. And finally, we have to test in real time the kinds of interactions that we have with our customers, with schools and universities and proprietary schools and so on all over the country.
Is there a silver lining in this cloud? Has this been in some ways an opportunity for the department?
Oh, in many ways it's an opportunity. It has made us look at our systems in a way that we haven't had the opportunity to do before. As I mentioned, we've replaced at least one system, actually well over one system if one were to count parts. I think we have a better understanding of the nature of the systems, and we are now modernizing a number of our systems so that deep understanding that we now have of the systems is going to help as we go through the modernization. So there's definitely a silver cloud in this. There's a lot of attention's been paid to it. There are some other kinds of clouds as well, and it has diverted resources away from doing things that we might have otherwise wanted to do. We're not sure exactly what the ultimate is going to be, what's actually going to happen on the year 2000. We just want to be very ready for it.
Another one of the faxed questions, Louis Grimaldi, he's the Chief Internal Auditor at Long Island University, asks, do you anticipate any disruption of financial aid disbursement? That is a huge question. I know a lot of people are interested in that.
I don't anticipate any disruption from our end or from most of our customers. But I cannot imagine a situation where there isn't some disruption. Whether it's a 1% or 0.5% or 0.1%, I don't know what the percentage is going to be, and I'm not sure what character it's going to take. But there's going to be something that doesn't work as well as it might, and we're going to be as ready as we possibly can and as in contact with customers as we possibly can in order to make the system work as quickly as we can.
Well, it looks like Louis is trying to build up his own contingency plan because his follow-up question is, if financial aid is disrupted, what can universities do?
Well, I think there's a number of different steps, and we are going to go out and carry out our contingency planning with the universities and schools and so on. People have suggested, for example, some early disbursement of funds so that universities would have their funds in hand on January 1st. That is, they'd have 2 or 3 weeks of funds. That's one possibility. We hope we don't have to go there, but it's quite possible. A second possibility is that at the school level, there are what are called third-party servicers. There are organizations that actually take over for a school or even a college at times and carry out the student aid function. And it's possible for us to put into place some of those third-party servicers to help a school. Another possibility is that there are actually alternative ways of of getting student financial aid often. And one way is through the normal fashion that schools are using with mainframes or other kinds of systems. But a third way is to go to electronic web-based applications, for example. And it could be that some schools where their system may have failed, at least for a while, could ask their students to go to a web-based application, and it would work. And that would be great, because in the long run, we want to move everybody to a web-based application, and so this may be a way to actually
again, it's an opportunity to really move forward at a much accelerated pace. One more question. Linda Huttenhauer, the Director of Finance at Colorado Mountain College, asks you, will the cash management systems related to financial aid be uninterrupted on January 1st, 2000, and will users be able to access these systems after January 1st, 2000?
The answer to both questions is yes. We're actually, we've extensively tested now the cash management systems and the other things, and we're going to be testing them in real time with dates changed and so on during the coming year. So I think we're going to be in very good shape on those fronts.
And I'm going to sneak in one last question, because this is a good one. Vincent Morris at Wheaton College faxed in, are we sure that automated federal financial aid and student loan payments will be properly recorded? That's a big concern of parents and students alike.
Yeah. We're as sure as we can be. I think I don't think that the year 2000 issue is going to affect that at all.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Mike. The Deputy Secretary is going to remain with us for our financial discussion segment as we consider the action steps that schools, colleges, and universities need to consider. Let's meet that panel now. Susan Nichols coordinates Team 2000 at the University of Iowa, the subject of the videotape we saw earlier in the program. And John Bailey directs the Office of Educational Technology for the Pennsylvania State Department of Education. Our first question, what does a comprehensive Y2K plan look like, and what are the basic elements? Either one of you, jump on in.
We at the University of Iowa, as you saw, have the Toolkit 2000. It's out on the web for anybody to see. It's also part of the readiness kit that the U.S. Department of Education has recently put together for post-secondary education, and that whole document is very valuable, very comprehensive.
Great. John?
It begins right at front with doing an inventory and finding out where is this problem impacting your institution, be it a school, be it a university, working on awareness, and then developing contingency plans and testing and implementation plans as well.
John, what about the schools that have not started addressing this problem? What should their plan of attack be?
Well, the first thing they need to do is make this a priority. This has to be their top technology priority. Above everything else, above connecting their classrooms to the internet, it needs to be at the forefront, and they need to get their school board members, their superintendents, their school business officers involved right from the beginning. Then they need to actually do an inventory. They need to inventory all their computer systems, all their software systems, all their embedded chips, anything that might have an embedded chip, and also the people that provide them services. These could be food service providers, electric, utilities, companies, and so forth, people that provide them services that could be disrupted. And then with that list, that inventory, they then need to prioritize what are the most important functions and systems in our school that absolutely need to get addressed before the year 2000 hits.
Even after those priorities are set, it's still, I would guess, sort of a management problem to make sure those priorities are being followed to the letter. How does that work? Or not work in some cases?
Oh, I think it's extremely important to have your top management, as we've all said, involved in this project, and also to understand that one person cannot do it all. It's hard to say that I cannot be an expert about everything, and that's not necessarily in my nature, but that is the truth. We have several hundred people on our campus who are working with this problem, and it's not just me, it is not Team 2000, but there are an awful lot of people involved in the project, and I think that's probably true in all these school systems that have spoken today. It's not just a few people, it is a great deal.
But Sue, I mean, let's be frank here. You've got professors who want to do one thing. You've got school administrators who want to do another thing. You've got facilities management that wants to do another thing. This is a herding cats issue, and sometimes you have competing agendas. People don't want to do this.
Right. And again, it's very important to have your top management. Our president, as you saw, is very involved in the project, and our Vice President for Finance and University Services is very involved. It's a top-down kind of thing, which is not a typical way of doing business in the education organization.
Mike, has that been your
I
experience?
think that's very true. I mean, if you don't have the top management involved, you're not going to have the allocation of resources that you desperately need in order to get this job done. And we were in situations actually when in the beginning of 1997, toward the middle of it, when we were not allocating the resources that we should have been. And the issues weren't coming to me quickly enough. There were people in the organization tried to work them out in different ways, as we normally do, all in very good faith. I mean, everybody working hard to get things done, but we needed to be much crisper. We needed to move the decisions much faster, because we did fall behind in a couple of instances. So, the allocation of resources, the attention, it's even more than just the top IT priority. I think now, if an organization hasn't started, it better become darn close to their top overall priority, because they could run into big trouble in almost a year.
So even if it feels counterintuitive to you on some level to go up and go to the boss and say, hey, I'm not getting the cooperation I need, this is an occasion I'm hearing that you're saying you got to do that.
Well, we need to have students on campus. We need to be able to admit them, to give them financial aid. Those things are happening now. Most everyone will be in a budgetary process soon. The budgets need to be formed and ready to go. And all this will occur prior to that January 1, 2000 date.
How are you doing there, by the way?
Oh, we feel we're doing great. Our financial aid systems were renovated a year ago, and our budgetary process is in the process. I think it's done. I haven't talked to somebody most recently about that, but we're doing pretty well.
John?
We're doing well too. We again, we're in charge of the department of making sure our department's technology is Y2K compliant, and we're about 98% complete there. And then we're also working very aggressively to do outreach campaigns to our school districts, to the private schools, and also to the public libraries, and also the colleges and universities in Pennsylvania.
John, you may be able to answer this next question we have from Albany, New York. Go ahead with your question.
That's an easy one.
Hi, Carl, are you with us there from Albany? I think Carl's driving as he's asking his question. All right, well, Carl, anyway, his question was, I believe, and Carl, I hope I don't do you a disservice here, but Carl's question was, what are the liability questions here in terms of insurance companies in this whole Y2K issue?
Yeah, that's one of the issues that has us most concerned, is the liability and potential litigation that could come from this. We've had one a consultant actually issue a report that we've read that said they expect the litigation worldwide that could result of the year 2000 problem to be in the trillions of dollars.
My goodness.
We ask school districts to consider that, again, when they're doing their systems. You may think that an embedded chip, you know, really, how's that going to impact us? But again, if a school district's fire alarm system doesn't work, or a sprinkler system doesn't work, what does that mean for the school district legally if they can't, you know, be able to provide that type of safety for the students there? And so it's very important that, again, this is why the executive leadership must get involved right from the start and make sure that these systems are ready. And then that's part of the awareness too, is that they need to let the community and other people know that they are working aggressively on this problem to protect themselves from that type of litigation and other types of insurance problems.
And again, Mike, it just backs up what John Koskinen was saying about hearing the bad news, you know, being open to hearing bad news and fixing these very important problems.
If you don't get the news on time, you're not going to get the fix done on time.
Exactly. We have one of the fax questions that came in to Sue. When we say test, test, test again, what are we saying and what kind of tests are needed?
I think, as everyone said today, you test your PCs, you test your hardware, software, your building mechanicals. We at the University of Iowa have medical equipment that has to be checked and tested. It's a huge liability for us. Just keep testing. Test that new equipment that comes in. If you receive 250 new PCs on your campus and they say, the vendor says they're year 2000 compliant, would be my recommendation to check several, just to be sure. The software, same kind of things. Once your IT people say that they are installing year 2000 compliant software, feel free to test that. Better to find the problems now than later.
This is a question that was faxed in for John. Are there any special grants or monies available for schools for Y2K in the state of Pennsylvania, and how do the schools apply?
Sure. Governor Ridge and Secretary Hickok about 2 years ago realized the severity of this problem, and so they made available close to $72 million over the past 2 years through our grant program called Link to Learn, which goes out to every single school district. That an eligible use of funds for that could be year 2000 assessment and compliance activities. We did that with the caveat that we really feel this is every institution's own budgetary problem and need. They really need to dedicate their budgets at the local level towards this, but we wanted to help them get that started. And so we made that available. The other thing we've done is through every single technology grant that we administer at the Department of Education is that we require if schools purchase computers or purchase internet access, it has to be year 2000 compliant. And that's just been a requirement so that they don't purchase systems that then need to get replaced or fixed later on.
Right, exactly. Now, Mike, can colleges and universities use Title III money for this?
Under certain circumstances, they can. That's right. And they should be in contact with the department in order to check out those situations.
Okay. Another question for Sue. What does a good contingency plan look like? Our viewer wants to know. What are the basic elements?
The basic elements are very similar to what you already have in your other contingency plans. You need to know what the trigger points are, when you need to actually use your contingency plan. As Pam said earlier, have several ready to go. If A fails, then go to B. On pages 40 and 41 of the readiness kit, which the Department of Education has brought out, are great details about contingency plans and several other websites to be reviewed.
And another question from Cal Poly. What items are most important for schools to consider as they address contingency planning? That could be for either one of you.
On our campus, we typically consider the healthcare issues, the life-threatening issues as being our most critical. Then we also look at how many students might be affected, how many faculty and staff might be affected by a certain outage or a certain software problem. And you kind of go from there.
Our approach has been, again, when you do that comprehensive inventory and start ranking them from the highest mission critical need down to the lowest, that really drives what the most important contingency plan is. So if your first one is safety and fire alarm systems, then that needs to be your #1 contingency plan. If it's student enrollment, if it's academic records and so forth, then they all need their own contingency plans as well.
John, what has been the toughest thing about the whole Y2K issue for you to deal with?
I think from our position, what's been different is getting our message out in between the two extremes. The extremes that the whole world is going to end, and the other extreme, which is that this isn't a problem at all. We feel it is going to be a problem, but to get that message out to the schools and to get them to take this issue as seriously as what it needs to be taken has been the greatest problem today.
And what do you think your most effective communication tools have been in doing that?
We've actually utilized almost every single type of technology and communication tool out there. We've done conferences, we've done video conferences, teleconferences, webcasts, we have a website. We have a great partnership we formed as a Commonwealth with the federal government of Canada and have developed a joint year 2000 website that's at www.pa2k.org. And that has a whole range of comprehensive resources from workbooks to actually a guide, a very successful guide that was written for executive leaders. It's very free, the technical jargon, and really speaks to superintendents, executive directors, and school business managers and school board members in a language that they can understand the severity of this problem. And that's been very effective and a good partnership for us to get the word out there.
That's a great resource. So we have another question. This is from Vincent Morris at Wheaton College. He says, as a contingency plan, he is starting to think ahead. He wants to know if they should postpone the start of their spring semester in the years 2000.
I think that's really up to the individual campuses or school districts. I think many post-secondary education's units start much later into January. At least we do on our campus. I think many Big Ten campuses do. I think it's an interesting question for school systems because those students typically go back, and Monday, January 3rd is that first Monday back at work, back at school. So I think that would be up to the department if that's going to be an allowable situation.
We have a question from Hagerstown, Maryland, from Mike. Go ahead with your question.
Oh, hi. Actually, it's Mary. I have a question for Mr. Smith and anybody else on the panel dealing with financial systems and security. And the question probably deals with security in general, which I haven't heard you address. You talked briefly about using the Internet as a backup for one of your financial systems if it should fail, and also internal to the campuses. How do you address the security issue of making sure that your systems are not able to be hacked into as you discover failures you didn't anticipate during Y2K transfer?
Mike?
Yeah, we have actually been using the net for the last year or so to communicate with students directly and with schools and universities. And we use a very high level of security, encryption, and so on. For us to say that it's absolutely secure, and that something in the Y2K mix wouldn't affect our systems and make them more vulnerable, it's impossible to make that argument. However, I think the chances are very, very, very small, and the difficulty of doing it would be great. So putting those two things together, I don't think it's a major problem at this point. However, we take it very seriously. We are going along with the government guidelines and even above the government guidelines in some places on the security protections that we take. So I feel pretty good about the security side of this.
We have a question from Roanoke, Virginia about the nuts and bolts of testing. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
My question with you is, how do you test? Do you set up redundant systems, and do you roll these systems forward? Do you set up isolated networks? If you have year 2000 equipment that is stated and has tested individually, how do you test it as a whole?
The answer is yes to everything, I think. Everything that you just said, Harry. You certainly want to roll the dates forward. You certainly want to test separate systems. You also want to test business processes, that is, systems that are directly connected to each other. You want to test all the interconnections that you have. I mean, it's a continuous process, and we're going to be testing right up to the end. In fact, beyond it, probably, as there are a variety of other kinds of things that need to be tested beyond the year 2000.
John, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. There's different software packages you can actually purchase to help test to see if your fixes are working, but it's really rolling up the date and making sure you have some good backups and seeing what happens. But that's the most crucial. You could think you're on your way to Y2K compliancy, and then you do a test and there's a mistake somewhere, and you got to go back through and try to find where that is. So the testing is real crucial.
Yeah, this is certainly not a time for any of us to be resting on our
Right.
laurels, is
Yeah.
it? Okay, thanks. I'm afraid we're out of time. Mike, any final thoughts for our audience?
Well, just a couple. First, it's really truly extraordinary that we're in this situation. That is, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, I don't think anybody would have expected this kind of a Y2K bug to have demanded this much attention and time and so on. And one begins to think about our reliance upon technology and so on. So that's maybe grist for another meeting. This date cannot be pushed back. That's really a fundamental point. The year 2000 is going to come in a year and a month or so, and we've got to be ready for it. We know there are going to be some problems out there, and I think all of our job is the job of the three of us on this stage and of all of you looking at this show is to try to minimize the number of problems that there are going to be, and to try to make, even if there are problems, to make contingency plans and have alternatives ready so that the lives of our students don't get disrupted.
Very good advice. Thanks, Mike. We've covered a great deal of information today. Let's review our basic approach for meeting the year 2000 computer challenge. First, schools and colleges should raise awareness within their community. For example, establish a Y2K project team to provide leadership. Prepare a budget and allocate funds. Second, take an assessment. This phase involves an inventory of all business processes, systems, personal computers, and equipment with embedded microchips. Assess the potential impact of Y2K-induced failures. Set priorities for system upgrades. Third, renovate all systems. This involves making software and hardware changes as well as developing replacement systems. Fourth, validate or test the systems. Test, test and more tests. And finally, implement. Put the converted or replaced computer systems into use. For more information, including Y2K best practices, visit the department's website at the address on your screen. There'll be more information on resources at the end of this program. Our thanks to Secretary Riley and Deputy Secretary Mike Smith, to John Koskinen, the Chairman of the President's Council on Year 2000 Conversion, our guest in the studio audience, and to the thousands of people who took part in today's program at sites around the country. For the U.S. Department of Education, I'm Nancy Mathis. Good afternoon.
For more information on Year 2000 issues, visit our website at www.ed.gov/Y2K. There you will find answers to frequently asked questions and resources such as the brochure, Year 2000, Challenge for America's Education Community. Download it, or to obtain a hard copy, call 1-877-4ED-PUBS. For post-secondary institutions, a Year 2000 readiness kit may be obtained by calling 1-877-4ED-PUBS, or you can order it online at the address on your screen. For the K-12 community, a Year 2000 compliance guide for elementary and secondary schools and school districts will be available after January 15, 1999. You can place your order now by calling 1-877-4ED-PUBS. If you have a question about Y2K issues not answered on this program, email us at y2k@ed.gov for issues involving elementary and secondary education and all other non-post-secondary programs, and OPE_Y2K@ed.gov for issues involving post-secondary programs. This program was produced by the United States Department of Education. All contents of the program are in the public domain, and use, duplication, and distribution are encouraged.